Good day. We are the group to present about current relations of China and the Philippines through its social, economic, and political factors. Moreover, the impact of the Chinese culture in the Philippines will also be discussed in this presentation. For centuries, the Philippines and China have been bounded by migration and trade. Even before the colonization of the Americans and Japanese, the Chinese have been in mainland Asia, which includes the Philippines. During the colonization of different races, in the year 1594, in the midst of crises and issues, the world's first Chinatown was established in the Philippine capital, Manila. And from there, the relations between mixed races have become frequent. The Chinese influence have become embedded in the culture of the Philippine people. June 9, 1975, the date where the Philippines and China agreed to have a diplomatic relations with each other. Ever since the agreement, bilateral partnership between the two countries has reached unprecedented levels in terms of political, economical, and social exchanges. One of the affected factors in this interaction was the social factors. Social factors were defined as the facts and experiences that influence individuals' personalities, attitude, and lifestyle. Based on researches, these are the factors that are greatly affected by the interaction between the two countries: culture, foods, and lifestyle. So, the current relationship of China and Philippines when it comes to these factors were as follows. In terms of food, China was able to influence the Filipino people up until now to their different food intake. Foods like siomai, Shanghai, and the most prominent dish were the noodles. As for the cultural aspect under the social factors, there are many things that the Chinese have given us when it comes to the cultural aspects. One of these was having a hierarchy in the family, such as having a sibling called as ate and kuya. Lastly, which is a factor that was greatly affected in the current situation between China and Philippines, was the lifestyle. Aside from superstitious beliefs that was until now was present in the Philippine settings. Moreover, the Philippines has also adopted the festive celebration of Chinese on different social occasions and holidays. But during this time, one of the things that China has given the Philippines, which was a virus, COVID-19, that created a bad effect on the social relationship between the two countries and its people.
Economic factors. By definition, economic factors are the factors that affect the economy and include interest rates, tax rates, law, policies, wages, and governmental activities. So how does this affect the relationship between China and the Philippines? There are three things that help strengthen the relationship of both parties. The first one is the Build program by the Duterte administration. Most constructions that made under this program were funded by the Chinese government as a loan in the country. One notable example is the Davao Expressway project. This encourages economic activity in the area. Second is the trading partners. China is considered as one of the country's major trading partner with a value of $944 million in August 2019 and also has the most value of important goods in the country with a 23.1% share of total imports in August 2019. And the last is in terms of investment. China was one of the country's top investors with investments reaching $980 million in 2018.
Political factors. By definition, it means that factors that are influenced by government decisions, taxes, infrastructure, public service, and the like in the local community, the nation, or internationally. Chinese political influence in the Philippines. There is a United States and a China camp in the Philippines. The sovereignty argument is used by both camps to impugn in other camp and its international support. However, no country exists in a sovereign vacuum. It bargains the casuals on the international diplomatic market to obtain what it needs. In exchange, it must give to other countries what they need. These needs can include resources right, freedom of passage for trade, or diplomatic support on unrelated matter through negotiated linkage. Individual politicians and businessmen can use this legitimate bargaining process for individual gain. In these instances, they obtain personal benefit in exchange for compromising the country's best interests. The virulence of Philippine critics in the United States adds evidence to the case that China is using its growing prestige and economic power to influence Philippine politics, including through individual incentives and with respect to South China Sea. United States military bases and military cooperation. State-sanctioned Chinese business regularly offer bribes to government officials in developing countries in order to obtain contracts, government license, and diplomatic support. The Philippines has been no exception, some elites of which have history opportunistically supporting rising powers.
The impact of Chinese culture in the 19th century Philippines. During the Spanish era in the Philippines, there were numerous Chinese entrepreneurs that continued to do trading and will later inhabit the country. The descendants of these Chinese will later be known to be the Chinese mestizos. The Chinese mestizos will soon to be one of the important elements of the Philippine society in the early 19th century. There were three prominent impacts of the Chinese culture in the Philippines. The development of the Chinese mestizos paved way for the emergence of the Philippine middle class. They were classified as wealthy people and had greatly affected the standard of living due to their economic wealth. Later in the history, many elite Filipino people would be classified or identified as descendants of the Chinese mestizo. Another impact was the formation of the Filipino identity. The Philippines' national hero, Jose Rizal, was a Chinese mestizo descendant, although he considered himself as a Filipino. Through his famous works, No Le Metangere and El Filibusterismo, he instilled nationalism and patriotism that would be identified as the Filipino identity. Jose Rizal also founded the movement derived from La Solidaridad and the propaganda movement which known to be the La Liga Filipina in the house of Doroteo Onjungco, whom is also a Chinese mestizo. Lastly, the Philippine Revolution. The Chinese mestizo were among the rebels in the Filipino-American War. The Chinese mestizo's involvement in the revolution was part of the accelerating political trend toward common actions with the Filipinos, and the accomplishment of this historic revolution was due to the patriotic awakening of the Chinese mestizos and their complete absorption into the social, cultural, and economic fabric of the emerging Filipino nation state. To add, there were numerous people that occupied important positions in the national political government. These were early President Sergio Osmeña, President Ferdinand E. Marcos, Ramon Magsaysay, Sepi Laurel, and Elpidio Quirino.
Impacts of Chinese culture in contemporary Philippine society. Way back before, the relationship between the Chinese and the Filipinos were great. Change is constant in this world. The change that we have right now is basically influence of our past. We can't deny the fact that one of the influence that we come from is the Chinese culture. One of the impacts of Chinese cultures is in foods. We all know that the Filipino are fan of foods. These foods can be seen every time when we are celebrating simple or big celebration. Those foods basically influenced by Chinese by teaching Filipinos on how to saute, cook noodle dishes, and rice cakes. Some of these foods are dim sums, siopao, pancit, and lumpia. There are many things involved when it comes to family. The traditions have been followed by the offspring of a Chinese man and a native Filipino. The decree was started way back before as the Spaniards feared the uprising growth of the population of Chinese, which led to marriage that will give a Chinese mestizo branding in which the culture it has been passed through its generation up to now. Regarding the firstborn child in the family, he or she have the responsibility and have the authoritativeness to his and her younger siblings. In the present years of contemporary world, it is evident that there are fixed marriage by two families that can be connected to partnership in business that can be seen, which practically a Chinese culture. As we grew up, many of our grandparents teach us a lot of things. One of these things are superstitions. For as we can remember, there is no single time that the elders teach us superstition to the generation of ours. The superstitions that have been mentioned basically of our grandparents are being brought until we grow up and believe in them without finding the reason why it is bad or good. This superstition basically influenced by the Chinese culture. The Filipino practice as well the culture of Chinese. And these cultures are Chinese festivals. We also believe in zodiac system, lucky and unlucky numbers, color of a shirt for today. And we were building houses. Some Filipino tries to use feng shui because they believe that it is helpful to live healthy and prosperous life.